Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com. A signature aspect of the Nike Mercurial series is the super aggressive FG stud patterns that they typically have on offer, and this latest generation is no different. These 4-bladed chevron studs with the 2 blades at the tip of the toe provide tons and tons of grip on a natural grass playing surface, making these boots feel extremely fast. However, for use on artificial grass, it is borderline dangerous, which is why Nike also offers an AG Pro stud pattern for the new Mercurial Vapor 16 Elite that I have here in the new Blackout Shadow Pack colorway, which for use on artificial grass in particular, because of those black rubber pellets typically staining light colored football boots, this will maintain its clean look for a much longer time than the light blue ones would. Although you can get those with the AG Pro stud pattern as well, with the retail price being the same $260 as the FG variation. Where I know availability on the AG Pro Nike boots hasn't been the best, but they are doing a much better job with the launch of the Mercurial so far, and if you are interested in a pair of AG Pro Mercs, you can actually pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy seeing videos on different stud pattern variations, don't forget to drop a like on this one and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, despite the obvious difference in the stud patterns, you can very clearly see that the AG Pro sole plate does mimic the design of the FG1, meaning that this is a brand new design when compared to what was available on the Vapor 15 and Superfly 9, even though the stud pattern itself realistically isn't that different. Where I think historically when it comes to AG stud patterns on a pair of high-end Mercurials, they typically don't have that same responsiveness as the FG models. Not the case this time around. This feels very similar to that of the FG one in terms of its kind of spring back effect and just general feel on feet. You can see the stiffening through the midfoot is pretty well identical, and you even have that kind of rippled wave finish running through the middle where you have one kind of longer normal support stud, let's call it, and then some shorter ones that are designed to more evenly distribute pressure across the bottom of the forefoot to make the Zoom unit feel that little bit more noticeable than what we had from the previous generation, where on the AG Pro model, just like the FG1, you're going to get that same 3/4 length Zoom unit, and for the most part, in terms of feel and effectiveness, it's just as noticeable on the AG variation as it is on the FG1. However, in particular for use on artificial grass, where you do have just that little bit less cushion typically than an FG natural grass playing surface, I really feel like the use of that Air Zoom tech is particularly beneficial to the overall comfort and experience of playing in these boots if you're going to be using them on artificial grass. As for the stud pattern itself, Nike certainly haven't reinvented the wheel here in that this remains very similar to other AG Pro stud patterns that Nike have put out in the past, where you're going to notice that there are a few extra studs in the forefoot than what you would typically find on the FG1. You still have 4 under the heel, with of course the main difference being the general lack of bladed studs, where you realistically only have 2 at the base of the heel and then 1 technically in the middle that isn't really going to do much in terms of restricting that freedom to twist and pivot, which is really why you're buying the AG Pro variation. All the studs, while about the same length as the FG model, maybe just a tad shorter, they're perfectly round in shape with a little bit of a hollowed out core, where the idea is they have that ability to flex a little bit to provide a break in the grip. Whether or not that's actually doing anything is really difficult to say because you're not going to be able to feel those studs flex. But certainly when it comes to playing on artificial grass, certainly when your foot is planted, you have that freedom to twist and pivot quite freely, where on the FG model, because of these chevron bladed studs and because artificial grass with those plastic blades of grass as well as those black rubber pellets, it's such an abrasive, clingy surface. When you plant your foot in an FG stud pattern, especially one like this, your foot is basically stuck. You don't have that freedom to twist and pivot. In other words, if you are moving really quickly, and whether you're trying to change direction or you get bumped by another player, that force has to go somewhere. And if you have that freedom to effectively slip a little bit, That's what's going to keep you safe with the AG variation, where with the FG model, if your foot doesn't have that ability to slip, all that force has to go somewhere, and that's typically going to be your ankle or your knee, which can cause a severe injury. With this really being the big misconception of an AG specific stud pattern, you're going to get really good traction out of both of these on an artificial grass playing surface. The difference is this bladed FG stud pattern puts you at a significantly higher risk of injury from just playing. And that's not to say that you couldn't get injured wearing the AG Pro variation on artificial grass. I would say artificial grass in general is one of those playing surfaces that is much harder on the body and therefore just more dangerous in general. But certainly when you're talking about assuming additional risk when playing what is ultimately a contact sport, you would be much better off, or at least your chance of not getting injured would be significantly better wearing these versus these. And let's be real for a second, Nike haven't reinvented the wheel with this AG stud pattern, and if we're being realistic, if we compare this to something like the FG Adidas Copa Mundial, is there realistically that much of a difference in terms of how these are going to perform on artificial grass? Not really. Both of these I would consider to be pretty safe because of the conical shaping that you have to the studs, basically creating a situation where you don't have too much grip, because that's really where things get dangerous, which also means that while this would be definitely the better version of the Mercurial to wear on artificial grass, while still allowing you to have all of those new Mercurial fits, feels, and technologies, you could also technically wear this AG Pro stud pattern on natural grass and get away with it. It's just going to perform a little bit more like a traditional stud pattern, pretty well what you would get almost from an FG pair of Nike Tiempos. Something else that's also important to note if you do regularly play on artificial grass is if you do have an FG pair and they get noticeably stained up by artificial grass and then do in turn end up breaking, when you go to make a warranty claim with Nike, they technically can refuse your warranty because you're wearing these boots on a playing surface they weren't intended for. Something else that typically can differ when you're talking about the same boots with different stud patterns is the overall weight. Let's use a scale and find out exactly what the difference is, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the FG variation, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 189 grams. Remember those numbers, and we'll throw on the AG Pro variation, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.5 ounces, the equivalent of 185 grams. That's a weight difference of 4 grams in favor of the AG Pro variation, which is a little bit surprising considering that these technically have more studs than the FG ones, but the scale doesn't lie. Technically, and while it's a kind of an insignificant amount of weight, the AG version of the Vapor 16 Elite is lighter than the FG one. And then as for everything from the sole plate up, there really is no difference between these two. Sometimes on an AG model, we can see a little bit of an extended lip in the plastic sole plate around the front edge of the upper. Not the case. You can see it's pretty well identical as the FG model, so obviously they're confident in the long-term durability of these, given that artificial grass is just a much more abrasive surface that's not only harder on your body, but also harder on your boots. But in general, Nike Grip Upper, Atom Knit in the base, flying it across the top, you get that additional grip on the ball in what is very much more of kind of a knitted approach to the Nike Mercurial series that we haven't had for a couple different generations now. Really, really positive. If you're looking to learn more about the overall performance characteristics, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen to my full review of the FG variation, where I cover basically everything there is to know from a tech perspective. It's also worth noting that this is the low-cut Vapor 16, but you can also get the Superfly 10 Elite with the AG Pro sole plate and stud pattern, which for use on artificial grass, I know a lot of people like the mid-cut boots, and having that collar kind of wrap a little bit higher up your ankle and a little bit more closely, because it can help in preventing those little black rubber pellets from getting inside of your boots. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're typically more of a Vapor fan, but if you are wearing them on artificial grass, the Superfly model for that extra $20 might actually be worth it. As far as fit and feel on feet is concerned, there's really no way to tell that you're wearing the FG or the AG variation of the Mercurial. Nothing about the stud pattern changes the feel, and I think a lot of that has to do with that 3/4 length zoom unit that stays consistent regardless of which stud pattern you have. And like I said, the sole plate this time around appears to be and seems to feel pretty well identical to that of the FG model. So they've maintained some nice consistency there despite the difference in the stud layout. So overall, if you're looking for that signature Mercurial fit and feel with the super responsive Zoom Air underneath your foot with a stud pattern that of course is better suited for use on artificial grass, that's exactly what the AG Pro variation of the new Mercurial basically is. As far as fit is concerned, it's a Merc, so you expect them to fit very tight. Compared to the previous generation, I wouldn't say that they've changed the shape all that much, but this new grip knit upper is much more Flyknit-like and much more sock-like in terms of its overall fit and feel, maybe relating it more closely to something like a Vapor 13 or a Superfly 7 if we had to compare it to a past pair of Mercurials. If you've worn Mercs in the past and you like that tight fit, these should work for you in terms of overall width. But overall, if you are somebody with really wide feet, they're probably not going to be the best option for you. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are going for the AG Pro variation, just like the FG ones, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, regardless of stud pattern, the new Mercs are awesome. If you regularly play on artificial grass, I would strongly recommend going for the AG Pro variation. If you don't play on artificial grass and just want the most aggressive traction possible, I would strongly recommend the FG variation. Or if you do play on both natural and artificial playing surfaces, there's nothing about the AG model with conical studs that would make it play poorly on natural grass. Like I said, this layout kind of ends up being somewhat similar to the FG one found on the current Nike Tiempo. So for use on both natural and artificial playing surfaces, the AG Pro variation of the Mercurial would definitely be the way to go.